Hi guys, thanks for watching the demo. At the end I'll show you the isolated tracks outside of the mix, and I'll do a playthrough so you can get an idea of the full range of the controls of the pedals. Before I talk about the pedals, let me give you an idea of how I'm using them and the signal chain. For the Sir Robin tones, I'm running directly into the clean channel of my KSR Artemis. I've left the clean channel for my normal bright, clear, clean settings rather than trying to compromise the sound of the clean channel to make the pedal sound better. This is giving you an honest idea of how well the overdrive pedal controls can deal with any sort of amp channel. And it's the true test of whether or not an overdrive is going to work with your rig. I'm doing limited, just minor EQing in order to get the track to sit in the mix to shave off a little bit of low frequencies. And that's about it. For the clean tones, I'm using a Chellee Compy compressor, and it's actually going direct into a Radial Engineering JDV Class A DI. In the interest of honesty and full disclosure, a DI is incredibly dynamic and it's very flat sounding. So there is quite a bit of post EQ to try to make the DI sound more like the slightly scooped bright mid-range of a Fender Deluxe, let's say. Also, you have to add compression post because it's very spiky and dynamic, even with the compressor. But you're going to have to take my word for it. The harmonic bloom that you hear is all 100% Chellee Compy compressor doing that tone. This is the way you achieve that classic 80s tone that you hear on Joe Satriani tracks like Not of This Earth and also Def Leppard tracks. So I thought that would be a cool way to show a different use of a compressor, and that's what I'm doing with that. The other thing to keep in mind is that I always like to run the overdrive pedals at 18 volts. So all of the Chellee pedals, all of the overdrives are either able to be run at 18 volts, those would be the ODs and the Sir Robin, or they internally ramp the voltage up to 18 volts. This gives you a better headroom with the pedal. It tends to tighten the bass end more, open up the pedal more, make it less compressed, and make the highs a little silkier. If you run it at 9 volts, you'll have a little bit more compression. So it's subtle, but it depends on what you want there. The other part is when you see any of the settings I'm using on the Sir Robin, I'm using the Sir Robin version 1. Sir Robin version 2, the presence control only goes up to where noon would be on my pedal. So keep that in mind. This is due to the fact that at first, in R&Ding the pedal, Peter thought that it would be good to give you, way more presence than you would need, but it turns out people didn't really comprehend how to use the pedal right, and they would set the presence way too high and improperly judge the pedal. So it's really not necessary to run that presence past noon ever on the version 1, so I've intentionally kept it all the tones below noon, so you can adjust to that. So if you have the version 2, or if you're interested in that, a setting of noon on my pedal would be full maxed out presence on yours. Okay, so let's talk about the pedals. First off, the Chellee Syrobin pedal. It's based on a Marshall Bluesbreaker circuit, but he's made various changes to it. The Bluesbreaker circuit has a glassy sort of plexi tone to it, and Peter has given you the ability to control that even more by the addition of a presence control on the front of the pedal. Now, being able to adjust the presence control in conjunction with the tone gives you that glassy tone. You can even get almost a Strat neck pickup tone out of a neck humbucker on a guitar if you want. And so that makes a big difference. Most manufacturers that make a pedal similar to the Syrobin, the presence knob is either a permanently fixed value in the pedal, or it's a trim pot on the back of the pedal, which makes it inconvenient. And honestly, if you look at the tones that I'm getting, you need to be able to adjust that. So I think that's important. Think of it as a variable bright switch. You start with it, maybe at 9 o'clock or off, and then add to taste. The other part is he's added a fat switch. This gives you a secondary mode that's almost a completely different pedal, which makes it a much wider and a super fat, overdriven Marshall sort of sound to it. Other than that, it has all the hallmarks of all the Chellee designs, where Peter essentially tweaks the pedals so that the bass end's tighter, the mid-range is less congested and more open, the pedals are more dynamic and transparent, and the high end is silkier without harshness, giving the pick attack a more natural, dynamic, tube-like response to it. So you can expect that. So if that's something you like, you'll like his pedals generally. You just have to find the right design for you. Also, the build quality of the pedals is second to none. Peter puts strain relief into the boards, and the pedal boards are through-hole PCB boards, and all the components are hand-populated and soldered. So they're completely robust. You could drop them off the top of the building and you're fine. The Chellee Compy compressor is based on a Ross Dynacomp design, but with a variety of circuit changes that add up to a meaningfully better pedal, in my opinion. First of these is the fact that it internally jumpers up to 18 volt. So even though it runs on 9, you have way more headroom because it's internally running at 18 volts. This gives you a much clearer sound and a better, more natural feel, in my opinion. It's also a 6-knob compressor. So it's got your typical sustain and output, but it has adjustable attack and blend. So you have the ability to blend in the dry signal with it, which gives you a more natural feel, even just blending a little bit in there. Additionally, it adds to that an input control, which is essentially setting the threshold of the compressor so you can compress more or less of the signal and also drive the input. So that will give you a totally different feel. It can even fatten up the pedal as you overdrive it. It depends on what you need. The tone control, when you turn it off, it functions like a normal Dynacomp compressor. As you turn it on, it brightens up the signal. Now, this to me is huge because I have tended to not like Dynacomp designs because they feel dark and mushy as you use the compression. And that's because even though the tone isn't really changed, you feel like it's changed because your attack has been lopped off. By adding the tone, it allows you to brighten it and bring back some of the brightness you perceive when you've gotten rid of, that you used to have when the pedal was off and your attack was normal. That's a big deal in getting the compression feel you want, but sounding like it's not compressed, which is good. There's different ways to run the pedal. I usually like to run it with just a little bit of dry signal blended in and a really low input threshold. Another way to run it that works really well is the input threshold cranked, so you're squashing a heck out of a ton of the signal. And then you run the blend so that you have a lot more of the dry signal, and that works really well. What follows next will be the isolated tracks. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.